Thank you thank you so much for making our time to be part of this session. Please, if you know anyone that is supposed to be part of this session, please, you can communicate with them to join us now, because this session is really going to be very insightful. So we are delighted to have Moses Kemi Barrow, an entrepreneurial and digital media and marketing professional with over 15 years working experience in some of Africa's most successful companies. Moses Kemi Barrow is the founder and CEO of DotSavvy, one of Kenya's leading digital agencies that conceptualizes, implements, and manages high-impact marketing solutions for Broadway organizations. In today's session, we will be exploring the best and next practices for digital marketing in Africa. And I am sure you must really be excited and ready to take it all in. Please don't go anywhere. Please stay with us. I guarantee that the next few hours will be a memorable one. Please let's welcome Moses Kemi Barrow.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for making time to be on this session today. My name is Moses Kemi Barrow, and I'm communicating with you today from Nairobi, Kenya, where today, surprisingly, it's sunny. It's been raining quite a bit on this side. As a person myself, I'm a big fan of Nigeria and Lagos in particular, and I do still think that Nigeria has the best jollof rice in West Africa, so I'm going to give you guys that vote. As somebody who's traveled extensively in that part of the world. So I'm delighted once again to be here on invitation from Simon Page College of Marketing to speak to you about digital marketing for the next normal, exploring best and next practices for digital marketing in Africa. Without further ado, we'll just get us started. Just to give you again some context, I'm the founder and CEO of a company called DotSavvy. We've been in this business now for over 20 years, serving a diverse range of clients. I've also worked as a consultant with Opera Ads, which has one of the biggest footprints across the continent through Opera Mini, the browser that basically allows you to save data. I've also worked with Gold.com, or The Zone as they're known today, working in the East African business in charge of sales and also acquiring clients. InMobi, one of the world's largest mobile ad networks. I was also the founder of a business called Dealfish, which I believe operated in Nigeria at some point, also known as OLX later on. And I'm also a blogger where I've been writing about digital and all things digital now for over 15 years. I've been training people on digital marketing since 2005, and I'm a proud supporter of Arsenal Football Club. And I hope to hear some shout outs during the training with our fellow Arsenal supporters. I'm sure there's a few here. And I always like to say that if there's any Manchester United fans in the room, you're more than welcome to leave. Of course, I'm joking, but yeah, we have our passion for football. So today's masterclass is very extensive. I would be very appreciative of you to, as much as possible, make sure that you take notes. There's a lot of content to be covered. I'm unapologetic about having too much content because I always believe in giving more value than anything. And of course, if we do run a bit long or you find that it's a bit weighty, it's just that, to do world-class digital marketing requires you to do a lot of things. And quite honestly, even today's masterclass is inadequate to cover all that I wanted to cover. But I think I managed to cherry pick what I believe are the most important components, just to give you the right foundation to move forward. I'd also encourage you, again, just to take screenshots or capture notes. And I hope a recording of this will be made available after the session. And we'll maybe try and make sure that you get as much out of this as possible. I'm also a big fan of keeping this interactive. So as much as possible, if you have any questions, any clarifications, feel free to mention it in the chat box, and I'll be happy to respond accordingly. So the four main things that I'm hoping that we're going to achieve today, starting from the top to the bottom, is actually, first of all, we are going to sort of look at the global digital marketing landscape. That is to understand what's happening, what's going on across the board. Number two, we're going to look at what it takes to create a digital marketing strategy. Somebody's microphone is on. Could you please turn it off? And then beyond that, we'll look at insights on how to develop content. This is going to be our most weighty section of today's training, where we're going to spend time trying to understand what it takes to develop great content, publish it, and drive reach and engagement and conversions for your target audiences. And then lastly, we're going to see how to manage or monitor your digital marketing performance, looking at key metrics. What are the things that you measure to determine whether or not you're achieving the desired outcomes? So I always like quotes. I'm a big fan of quotes, and I like to start this session by just saying that we're going to be learning a lot of things today. And it says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is Alvin Toffler, who's was a major management thinker in terms of understanding strategy and what it takes to really achieve significant change. And I think we live in a world today that, especially post-pandemic, everything that we knew has changed. I personally have been running my digital agency for the last over 20 years. I am shocked at what happened over the last 3 years. All the things we thought could not happen or were taking so long to happen were really compressed and accelerated within a short period of time, and not just in the world, but also in Africa. Till today, my business, we continue to work remotely. The majority of our clients don't even want to meet us in person. They're more than happy to meet using virtual means such as a Zoom call like we're doing today. And what I would like to say is that basically the world has changed to such an extent that digital marketing, which I think pre-pandemic was considered almost a nice to have versus a must to have, has become front and center of all marketing activities. In fact, you'll find that a lot of even traditional marketing activities are now essentially following the best practices around digital. So in anything, what I've seen in the last 3 years have really been profoundly and significantly important because it's changed everything, and more importantly, the consumer has changed. The consumer's behavior around digital channels and digital consumption has significantly evolved from what it used to be. So our agenda for today is based on these 7 areas that we're going to cover. Number 1 is the landscape. That is just really to get a sense of what does the digital marketing landscape look like today. Number 2, strategy. How do you develop a compelling strategy which ultimately underpins your digital marketing? One of the things I see a lot of organizations fail to do well is actually build a solid digital marketing strategy. And if you don't have a good strategy, then everything else that you do after that actually fails because you don't have a foundation upon which to build all your tactics. Then we'll look at content. This is going to be our most weighty and expansive section of coverage today, where we'll talk about what does it take to create great content, and especially now in the context of artificial intelligence. We're going to touch a bit on ChatGPT. We're going to see how AI and artificial intelligence has become so fundamentally important in the context of digital marketing, in terms of what we're seeing around today. So AI is something we're going to touch on in there. Then we'll look at social media broadly, look at the platforms, how they work, what are some of the things you need to know about how to get the most out of each platform. We'll then look at advertising to understand what sort of avenues are available for digital advertising and how to maximize or achieve the best outcomes. We'll then talk about best practices in websites. I know that most of you either work for organizations or perhaps are entrepreneurs or marketers in your own right. You might want to understand what are some of the things you need to look out for to get the most out of your website. So presuming you already have a website, what are the optimization steps that you need to look at to get the most out of it? And then lastly is really Web3, which is where we'll just sort of spend a bit of time to understand what possibly the future of Web3 is going to be. I know that in the last year or so, there's been a lot of upheaval in this space. Meta, which is formerly Facebook, invested billions of dollars that have not really delivered on the promise as yet. But what we can see is the early moments or the early signs of what we think the internet might become, and more particularly, how this might impact digital marketing as we know it. So I felt that was important for us to sort of wind up on that note, looking at the future, looking ahead, and what the new context of digital marketing might look like. So I thought it's a good place to start, just to understand the global headlines, as it were, to see where we are. And these numbers are from about a year ago. I believe the source of this data is not yet submitted or delivered the latest insights, but we're looking at a population of almost 8 billion people in the world. Mobile connections, which of course is definitive to the fact that everyone usually has 1 or 2 lines. So that's why it's a bit more than population, over 8 billion. Internet users, approximately 5 billion. And then active social media users, about 4.62. So the interesting correlation there is that when you see the internet users as well as the active social media users, it's almost perfectly matched, meaning that your average internet user is going to use social media as well. And that's where the bulk of our activity and our content is going to focus on social media, specifically as where most of digital marketing happens today within Africa. When it comes to the platforms of choice, you will see that, again, according to data from last year, Facebook was almost 3 billion users. I believe that threshold might have been crossed as of this year, followed by YouTube. And then we have WhatsApp, which today increasingly starting to behave like a social media, although it's primarily a messaging platform, over 2 billion users. Instagram at almost 1.5, WeChat, which is predominantly used in China, sitting at 1.2 billion, and TikTok actually at over 1 billion at that point in time. And I believe as we speak, TikTok is now in the region of about 2 billion users. And I think, again, TikTok is going to be fundamental to our session today because that is a platform that is the fastest growing. And of course, there's a lot of geopolitical considerations around how TikTok has been performing. But by and large, as much as everyone is saying that Facebook is dead or is dying, we can see the numbers do not lie. Facebook remains the most significant platform. YouTube, again, very significant, even in Africa, where we note that even though people quite often are worried about data and data consumption as a costly endeavor, we see that YouTube is still very, very popular. Now, when it comes to, again, discussing the context of digital marketing today, I don't think we can have that conversation without talking about COVID-19, right? Number one, we see that even 3 years later, sales have been reduced. Consumers and businesses generally stop purchasing products and services internationally. We learned that fantastic phrase, supply chain, which became sort of common language when we finally understood that things don't just go from point A to point B easily. There's a whole chain of different things that need to come together. Massive job losses, we're seeing the reverberations even today, where we're seeing even the largest technology companies are laying off people. So, again, the reverberations 3 years later are still very much happening. For me, probably the most exciting component is the shift in consumer behavior. We saw a scenario where people are working from home. Consumers are spending more time on digital platforms at the expense of traditional media. And a lot of that behavior now means that globally, we're seeing that the sort of global consumer is digital first in everything they do. They stream Netflix, they purchase products online, they do Zoom calls for training as we're doing today. And that has become sort of the standard de facto modus operandi of how people are operating. And then businesses continue to struggle. It's not, it's not been easy. It's not been, a good time. What we must realize is that, again, businesses have suffered consequences, in particular because of social distancing, but also at the same time, just generally economies have struggled as a result of COVID-19. So now we sort of enter the era of what I'd like to call the new digital normal, where we see innovation around digital is key, or what people often refer to as digital transformation, changing the way businesses, organizations, and brands are operating. We see digital channels have become so essential for customer engagement going forward. That is both in acquiring, maintaining, and supporting customer relationships as brands. Strategic partnerships have been key. I'm sure that in Nigeria, you've also seen a scenario where, say, in the hospitality industry, the likes of Uber Eats, Glovo, and others working closely with existing businesses to essentially enable them to sell digitally. We also see investments where increasingly organizations are even building in-house studios, building e-commerce capabilities for their platforms, so that now they have a digital interface that allows them to actually do business online. So all these things basically are sort of changing how things have been. And then again, when it comes to utilizing digital for marketing, and it's specifically looking at it relative to other types of media, we can see digital, for instance, gives us a very high level of media richness, meaning that we have video, audio, and all the different ways that we want to communicate. It's very interactive relative to the other types of media that are out there. Probably one of the most exciting possibilities is the ability to one-on-one target, where we can be, geo-targeting to a specific audience. We can look at gender, we can look at age segments, we can look at interests. We have the ability to essentially speak to the right person at the right time with the right message in almost a surgically precise manner. We also see a lot of value in terms of investment of content, what it actually costs you to reach a potential buyer or consumer for your offering or your marketing message is significantly lower, and especially on platforms like TikTok and also on Facebook. We've seen that the cost of the media on these platforms is extremely affordable, meaning that even with a modest amount of money, the smallest businesses can achieve some kind of reach and conversions at an affordable price. Measurability is very high. I've seen campaigns where we start a campaign in the morning and in the afternoon, we already can see that it's not performing as expected, allowing us to pause the campaign. If you look at traditional media, you might have done a campaign plan that's running for an entire month, and you won't know maybe until the end of the month whether your campaign is working or not. So digital gives us the ability to get that almost instant feedback, almost real-time ability to understand whether our marketing is working or not in a way that other media channels can't. And then lastly, the return on investment, very, very high relative to other types of media, meaning that, again, in the context of the pandemic, we saw that brands and organizations that had become somewhat compromised financially decided to double down on digital because it still gave them the best value for money relative to any other media with the little resources that they had. So for me, again, this is quite exciting because it means that organizations have now woken up to the fact that digital marketing is not just great for performance, but also great value for money and gives you a good return on investment. We're also seeing within the current context of the landscape that, first of all, customer engagement has changed, driven by disciplined approaches to segmentation and lead generation. So we're driving marketing and communications agility. This, again, has been enabled through digital. We're seeing a shift to the digital channels and extracting value from existing innovation to drive our strategies. Customer experience, and more in particular, customer journeys have become much more about engagement, experience, service, acquisition, and sales. And also the digital divide, solving delivery and last mile channels as customers practice social distance and remote working. We're seeing this enhancement around logistics and making sure things are moving from place to place in order to achieve sort of the full end-to-end potential. We're also seeing that digital customers and sales are key. So customers are seeking and finding more information on their own via digital channels. And this is critical because that means how you manage and run your digital channels must always be cognizant of the fact that your customers are now in control. There's an information abundance, and brands must find a way to be heard through the noise. And also the interaction with existing and prospective customers, especially early in the sales process, is driving relevant information in the early stages of the buying process. So this means, again, as they're doing their homework, as they're researching alternatives, the brands that are most visible and providing the most insight are the ones that potentially are going to drive the most conversions. So for us to do this effectively, and again, looking at the whole landscape as I've described, we want to make sure that, first of all, we focus on the 3 pillars that are going to drive our digital marketing, because this, again, becomes core to our strategy. Number one, for it to be successful, we need to understand how our customers become aware of our offerings and what actually makes them convert. Convert meaning them buying our products or services. Number two, the conversion process is largely dependent on generating content that appeals to them. Ultimately, whenever you think about digital and where we are sort of communicating, whether it's through ads or social media content, a big part of this is actually about conversion and content. And content is not just about creating conversions, but also conversations, because conversations ultimately lead to conversions. And then lastly, retention. It's not enough to bring customers or stakeholders into our platforms and our brands. We must also think about retention, meaning that we are looking at ways and means of keeping them on brand, keeping them on our platforms, keeping them loyal to what our value propositions are through our digital marketing activities. This is our typical, sorry if I can go back. This is our typical customer journey when you think about the digital channels. We might run a digital ad campaign. We might have a mobile app, maybe a corporate website. Maybe it's email marketing where we're communicating newsletters and content to our customers, or maybe it's our social media. And the idea is that then through these points of connection, through these touch points, they come and engage with our digital platforms, they engage with our digital content. This then leads to online and offline transactions, which ultimately feed into a conversion. A conversion can be a sale, can be a download, can be any desired activity that we want our stakeholders or customers to take. And through that customer journey, the idea is that what are the different things that you need to do to not just create awareness, but also to drive conversion and retention. As you break that down into more detail, this is your classic conversion funnel. And for us, we're looking at several steps that are critical. Somebody's microphone is on, please turn it off. So we want to come through awareness, and that means basically top of funnel to make. Oh my word. Have I not been audible all this time? Oh no, sorry. I had no idea.
No, it's not you. It's fine.
You have been audible. Somebody did not mute.
Turned me off.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Great, you're great, you're great. You've been doing great.
Okay, sorry, I thought I was talking to myself all this time. Okay, so yeah, awareness. How do we make sure that we're seen and heard? And this is where, for instance, you're running your ads, you're pushing out social content, your website, etc. Then we go into engagement, which is the middle of the funnel where prospects are engaging with our content and our messaging. We then reach the conversion moment, which is where they actually take the purchase decision to purchase our product or service. And then retention, where we want to keep them on brand and keep them loyal to what it is that we're doing as a brand. Again, when we think about conversions, we want to just think about how we're pulling them through the funnel and making sure that they're making that decision. We can have macro conversions, which is them actually purchasing, or micro conversions, which is small activities, like such as signing up for a newsletter. And obviously, we want to always know through analytics and other means what are the activities that are driving sales and what could be possibly wasting our money. We might be running a lot of activities across different digital marketing channels, but ultimately, we need to understand what is actually driving the performance when it comes to our digital marketing activities. And most importantly, where are we getting the highest or most efficient value of conversions? Another thing I want to bring out in terms of landscape, and this is something that's so critical these days across social media and all digital marketing, is the impact of digital privacy. In Kenya, we are already seeing those laws across Africa. In markets like South Africa, they've got POPI. Globally, which cascades to everyone. We have GDPR. The whole element of digital privacy is becoming increasingly important. And organizations need to start paying attention to this, not just for where they're domiciled within the country where they operate, but at a global level, we are now basically required to pay attention as consumers really want to take control of how their data is used. But more importantly, that's done in an ethical way and within the sort of legal boundaries. Another thing that's becoming so fundamentally important going forward is the issue of first-party data. Making sure that you're spending time to get your customers' details, which is things like their mobile numbers, their email addresses, their physical locations, and so forth, so that if you understand where they are and how they're engaging with you, you have the benefit of being able to communicate with them directly. And this is becoming increasingly important because we're moving towards a future where in digital marketing, we will not be having the benefit of third-party tracking cookies. There's going to be very limited capabilities on many of the ad platforms. And increasingly, as platforms double down on privacy, the onus is on the brand or the marketer to actually start developing a strategy to start building their first-party data. So that means making sure you're spending time and effort and even building campaigns with the explicit goal of making sure you have the contacts of your customers or the prospective customers that you're trying to bring into your brand. So ultimately, some of the key drivers that we're seeing when it comes to the adoption of digital marketing across the continent, number one is that we must always look at focusing on mobile-first content. That means adapting and sizing our content for the mobile screen, because as you know, 90% of our audiences across Africa, typically across all markets, is always going to be mobile-first anyway. Number two, our users are mobile and social, so engage accordingly. Social media is where the bulk of your digital marketing will happen within an African context. So please always remember that and make sure that you prioritize the social media platforms for that. Number three, we are seeing a convergence of affordable smartphones and at the same time also affordable fast internet on the continent. Again, this is one of the ways and means that we're seeing that consumers at scale across every demographic are now operating on mobile devices. We're seeing even mass consumer brands that typically would never have thought of using digital pre-pandemic are now prioritizing digital because that is where the majority of consumers are operating. So again, think about the fact that every person on every level is online, particularly on social media, and affordable smartphones and fast internet make this possible. So now we'll delve into strategy, and I'd like to take you through kind of the strategy cycle that we'll be looking at. And this starts off at the top, where we spend time understanding our organization and its objectives. Are we trying to drive sales? Are we trying to build brand awareness? Are we trying to improve customer service? Are we trying to improve operational efficiency as a result of engaging on social media channels? So we need to understand what are those objectives and what are we hoping to achieve. Number two, what are our objectives or for each specific goal that we as a business are operating? Thirdly, what are the key performance indicators? How will we know we're successful unless we have KPIs? So again, getting to a more scientific approach to how digital marketing is done is to make sure that you have KPIs and also targets for each KPI. Which channels are you going to drive for your targets? Again, not every channel works the same, not every customer is the same. You might find instances where you're using, for instance, LinkedIn to reach more of your professional market segments. You might find that you're using maybe TikTok to reach more of your younger demographics and the younger consumer. So again, it's not about one size fits all, but as you build your strategy, you need to start thinking, where should I be and who am I communicating with to drive the right engagement? And then you have critical success factors. How do you measure or monitor or achieve your digital strategy? And this again is about thinking about all the things that have to be in place to make it actually work. Do you have a way of measuring analytics? Do you have a social media management platform? Do you have the budget to run digital ads on Google and Facebook? So really thinking about all the things that actually have to be aligned to make sure that your digital strategy works. And then lastly, achieving results where we see the performance. We're also able to measure that performance, and ultimately based on that result, we're able to then go back into the cycle and make sure that our digital marketing is working as expected. So the digital marketing framework that we are supporting and going through today is something called SOSTAC. SOSTAC is definitely a part of also more conventional traditional marketing, but the same principles apply even though it's digital marketing. And the way it works is basically SOSTAC is an acronym for the different phases or the different moments in which you're developing your strategy. The first one being the situation analysis, which is understanding where you are as an organization or as a brand in terms of your current digital presence. And this is really an honest assessment where you try and see, first of all, from the data that you have available, but also how do you benchmark relative, let's say, to your competitors or contemporaries. Number two, where do we want to be? And this is where objectives become critical, because these now become essentially the aspects where you're sort of firing your arrow to see where we're going to be, where do we want to be, where are we today, and of course, understanding the gap to where you are and where you like to be. Thirdly, strategy, how do we get there? This is where now we sort of start to map out the roadmap, as it were, to achieve our desired outcome, which then takes us into our tactics, where we break down the specific activities and specific details of what we hope to achieve. And then we have our actions, which is essentially the details of our tactics. And then lastly, which is that famous phrase, monitoring and evaluation, that people in the NGO world use. Where do we check our controls to see what's working, what's not working, and then how do we course correct before going back into the cycle? So that's basically SOSTAC at a very high level. And we'll just expound a little bit on each one in the context of digital marketing. So the situation analysis is where you sort of spend time planning and looking at your strategy, understanding your current performance, understanding your situation. And this could be things like understanding the demographics and behaviors of your current audiences on digital platforms, traffic from referral and engagement levels. Again, this is sort of insights you're picking up from things like your Google Analytics or Facebook Insights. Look at what the devices and the platforms that your users are using. What pages are they landing on? What's the bounce rates and visitor flow on Google Analytics? And also, the performance and tactics of your closest competitors, where you can sort of kind of benchmark and see how you compare. And again, as you're measuring your current performance, you want to sort of, this is an important step because you're really looking at the end of the day to build a sort of a SWOT analysis, where you spend time understanding your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats with only digital marketing channels in mind. And usually at this point, you're sort of able to look at the broader KPIs, such as your traffic, comments, shares, downloads, sales that are happening online. And you really want to look at bigger picture questions and bring other people into the room in the organization so that you can have different perspectives around what you need to do to achieve a high quality digital marketing approach. Then when you're doing your sort of assessment, you spend time looking across at all your platforms. And here's where you kind of look at the key metrics. So for instance, on Facebook, you try and understand maybe your aggregate performance per month on things like likes, fans, comments, shares, and impressions. On Twitter, you'd be looking at followers, engagement, another key criteria, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and of course your website. And the idea is that once you collate all this information, you really have an almost perfect analysis of understanding where you actually stand, which then helps you create your objectives based on the insights you have. In terms of developing your objectives, we often say that the most important thing about your objectives is trying to be as precise as possible, or using what we call the SMART approach. And this means that basically you want to make sure that your goals are specific. You also want to make sure they're measurable, they're achievable, within the context of the resources and the budgets you have available, that they are relevant to the wider communications and objectives. So again, these things need to be aligned to things like your strategic plan. And then also time bound. You want to make sure these are just not open-ended objectives. These are things that you're saying are going to happen in a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year. And you're sort of able to then cascade and plan according to those timelines. But make sure that you're always using the SMART approach, which is again specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and also time bound. This then brings us to strategy, and really it's about making the choices in terms of what kind of approach you're going to use for your digital marketing. And again, you're thinking through the longer term perspective here. For instance, you have things like key communication periods throughout the year. So things like Christmas, Easter is coming up, New Year's, back to school. All these are specific moments when, depending on the nature of product or service you're marketing, you want to make sure you're aligned to that. Content themes that are relevant to your audience. We'll look at this in the content section today. What types of content to generate and the resources and budgets to do it. Everyone loves video content, but again, video content costs money to create. So think about, it's one thing to say you want that, but what does it actually cost to do? And then also monitoring, how you're going to monitor and see how your content is performing. And this is where, of course, you have, a sense of, analytics and other key ways of monitoring your performance. And then again, utilizing both paid and earned media to drive reach, growth, and engagement. You also have, again, the key tactics that will define how you use your digital marketing. So for instance, designing the use cases for your marketing, things like content calendars and processes that support them, the tools and processes that are needed to do so, social media listening, which is one of the areas that's become increasingly critical, especially in the context of social media crisis. And then you also have paid media, where you're buying ads or you're working with influencers to actually achieve your strategy. I see a comment here from Femi to everyone. Are we getting the recording, the presentation as shared? I'll leave that to the team at Simon Page to advise. They will let you know if this will be shared. Also, when it comes to your tactics, these are again specific things that you need to do. So what content will you produce, for instance, as well as planning and scheduling of the same? Will you be broadcasting at specific times of the day and weekends? Again, using analytics, you will understand when your audience is most active when you look at your dashboards. Will you share content on social and mobile platforms? And then how are you tailoring your content for the different audiences and personas? Remember, a brand typically has a number of personas that you're targeting. It could be everyone from the youth segment to people who are retired, depending on the nature of product or service you have. But how are you tailoring your content for those audiences, and which platforms are they most predominantly going to be active on? So think about how then you map the specific tactics to all that detail. We also have the actions, which is really the day-to-day activities. I particularly like actions in SOSTAC because it's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of, so how is this actually going to get done? So you're thinking about the roles and responsibilities of those who are doing this day-to-day, the tools and the software, listening, publishing, collaborating, reporting, either using the native platforms built into things like Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth, or you buy third-party platforms to do that. What are the processes, the things that need to be done by team members? So for instance, how do you manage your social media on the weekend? How long does it take you to respond to queries? All these things ultimately boil down to people. And if you don't have a clearly mapped out approach or some kind of operational manual for that, then it won't actually happen. And then do you have the capacity to do it in-house? Do you need external agencies or partners or freelancers to execute? You'll find, again, these are questions that come up when you get to the phase of understanding actions, because it really does give you that granular detail of what needs to happen to actually make this strategy come alive. And then you have controls, or like I mentioned earlier, the monitoring and evaluation, where you spend time, sort of monitoring, weekly, daily, monthly, whether or not you're achieving those targets. And remember, again, for marketing to get investments, to continue doing marketing work, we have to deliver results. It's all about data and insights, and bottom line, the attribution of those activities to the bottom line. And this is where we spend time, again, making sure that we're mapping our digital marketing activities to specific business outcomes. Did we get more customers? Did we generate more sales? Did we improve customer delivery, or what they call the Net Promoter Score? What are all these KPIs, and what are the results we're getting relative to them? So again, this is a beautiful stage in terms of really being able to measure, monitor, and then adapt or modify your strategy so as to achieve the desired outcome. We'll now get into content. And again, as mentioned previously, this is probably going to be our most weighty section of today's training. And for me, content is king. This is a phrase we've used from the very earliest days of digital marketing, or the internet, as it were. And basically, again, post-pandemic, we see that every organization has become some kind of a digital content operation. Even having a webinar and then sharing that with your customers is a form of content. And therefore, we're looking at everything from video to text, copy, audio, podcasts, blogs, webinars. All these, especially again, as a result of the pandemic, have become a way for organizations to connect with their stakeholders. In fact, I've been at various organizations where I've also conducted other training, and we now see that many organizations, banks, telcos, and so forth are building content creation capabilities in-house. They're buying cameras, they're building studios, they are investing in teams that can do this in-house. And basically, it's become an extension of their core operations. It's no longer something that sits on the outside and they sort of reach out to a partner to do for them every so often. They're actually building that capacity to do so, because the need for regular and interesting content for stakeholders has necessitated this newer strategy for a lot of businesses and organizations. And why is this important? Because content, I think, at the heart of it, brings your brand to life as to who you are and why you do what you do as an organization. A customer or prospect cannot have a context or an appreciation of what you're trying to achieve as a brand or organization if the content does not speak to that. And again, this comes back to why you need a digital strategy, because the strategy underpins everything you're going to do after that. So with a good strategy, you'll have all this mapped out, you'll know why you're doing this, and then it allows you to connect to your target audiences in a personalized and authentic way. And quite often we talk about the need to also map out your personas, who are the ideal target customers for your offerings, so that you can have a more personalized and authentic engagement to them. And then ultimately, good content will build relationships that are based on relatable and contextually relevant content. Again, we're not building a one-size-fits-all digital marketing strategy. We need to look out of our personas. Who are we speaking to? Who are we targeting? And can we create content that is based on insight on what is most important to them? And of course, using things like analytics allows us to see what performs well versus what is not performing well. And we double down on the content that we can see delivers value to our customers. So digital content ultimately has to resonate. And to make this work, you need to think about, number one, is our content tightly focused on our existing and intended audiences? Now, remember sometimes, and I've seen this many times on social media, the current people you have on your social media platforms as community members may not necessarily be the people that you're trying to attract, okay? So you might find that as you sort of look back to your strategy and who you want to reach and how you want to grow according to your objectives, that you might actually be looking at a different stakeholder, a different potential community member. So think about, first of all, are you creating content for those who are already on your platform, or is it in line with the people that you're trying to reach? Number two, is the content helpful, useful, and valuable? I see a lot of organizations in the work I do where they'll spend money even doing full page ads and even TVCs, where the ad is all about what they have achieved as a brand, but the content is not actually serving the customer. It's more of a pat of the back, or a pat on the back for themselves, saying that we are great. Always prioritize content around the end user. How do you, provide content, for instance, that's tips or guidance or things that solve a particular pain point for your customers? Provide that kind of content and they will be happy with you. Number three, entertaining content. And as we go into this content section, I'll show you how, say, two of the largest banks in Kenya also have fun content. They're making, billions of dollars, but at the same time, they allow their content to be also a bit casual, because that's how they're connecting with their youth segment. So content should not always just be, helpful, useful, and valuable, but also, can it also be entertaining? And then probably the most important point here is, is content woven in storytelling? Storytelling is a device or a mechanism that we've used for millennia as human to pass on narrative and create brand connections with our stakeholders. Again, content should therefore not be boring or purely content for the sake of content, but we need to find ways of inserting or injecting an element of storytelling within the content that we publish, because that is what is going to make it most resonant with our target audiences and personas. So typically when it comes to content distribution and digital marketing, we want to start off first of all by creating value-added content and offers. So this could be everything from case studies, white papers, videos, podcasts, offers, blogs, you name it, you create it. You feed this into your social media platforms and other digital platforms for that matter. And over time, as you publish, you listen to see how the stakeholders and the audience is responding to your content, which then will give you the insights of what is actually working and not working, allowing you then to go back into the cycle. At the same time, the two things that you find generate significant impact when it comes to content is the connections. Connections meaning those stakeholders who are on your platforms and engaging with your brand, and that ultimately then leads to conversations. And conversations are everything on social media. Someone's microphone is off, please turn it off. When it comes to content and connections, you will find that the most important thing you need to do is focus first of all on listening. I'm sorry, we still have some audio feedback. Somebody's microphone is on. Please turn it off. Thank you very much. When it comes to listening, this is probably the most important step in your social media journey as a brand, because it's only through listening that you understand what the communities want and need. So rather than creating content from your own perspective, or rather what you think is right, listen so that you can gain insight, and that informs the content. The content also can come in many different forms, and that means even difficult conversations. So engage with the community that you want to have with you as a brand organization. You also want to create diverse conversations with your communities, and I'll show you some of that in a moment. Individuals, again, people like influencers and key voices is also important. Choose the platforms where you can drive the right conversations. Again, not every brand has to be on every platform. And then strategy, using connections to keep conversations interesting and connected. When it comes to the actual content, think about the things that make content interesting, or the things that always resonate with you when you use social media. I mean, first of all, is it unexpected? Is it timely? Is it provocative? Does it have movement and motion? We know one of the things that works really well online is content that has a visual aspect, that is vibrant, that is moving, that is colorful. You know, those are things that catch people's attention. Is it eye-catching? Is it thumb-stopping? So when you're scrolling on your screen, does it work for you? And then also when it comes to the visuals, are they essential? Are they interesting? Are they powerful? And then also creating and repurposing content that will resonate with your target audience. I see some conversations happening in the chat, so give me a moment. I'm sorry, I hope you can all hear me. Am I audible? Okay, great, excellent. And when it comes to, again, the content considerations, we also want to think about other key steps. For instance, are we running calendars, which means we're running topical content plans and calendars that update us on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis? Is it helpful and engaging content, as mentioned earlier, that will keep us top of mind? Again, we don't always want to be creating content. We may not have the capacity to do so. So we want to also repurpose content that we think our audiences are going to find useful or relevant. So this is very important because, again, sometimes when you want to switch up content so that your audiences are more engaged, it doesn't have to be stuff you create. It can be stuff you find somewhere else that you think is relevant to your audience, and then you package it onto your platforms. And then also scheduling, figuring out when those updates should be posted. Popular convention is that you want to post maybe once in the morning, once around lunchtime, once in the evening. But if you look at things like your analytics, you'll be able to see when your audience is most active. You might find, for instance, as we saw in Kenya, there was a brand that was launching and marketing diapers to mothers of babies, and they found that actually the best time to reach them that drove the most sales was when they were active between midnight and 3 a.m. when they're actually feeding their babies. So because of that strategy, what they did is they then put all their budget and reach and on their Facebook ads to reach that particular segment during those times, and also Instagram. And they saw sales actually triple in that period of time. So rather than running it throughout the day, they were able to schedule it between midnight and 3 a.m. And that's when they got the most sales. So sometimes when you use your data and you look at your insights, it might be contrary to what you think in terms of driving the biggest results. I'm seeing some more chat comments. Not very audible here. I'm sorry, I can't do anything about the audibility. I'll do my best to speak as audibly as possible. So when it comes to content, it's also important to think about the different steps to creating great content. And the first step is obviously research, where we spend time kind of understanding what is the best way to create this content. Planning our content, which is essentially how we're going to do it. Then we create and curate our content. We publish it on our platforms. We measure the performance, and from those insights, we then go back into strategy, research, and we go back into the cycle. So typically, the way this process works, number one, we start off with the audit process, and this is basically looking at all our content, both written narrative, videos, images, graphics, and so forth, just to understand what do we actually have at hand. And you might find, surprisingly, that there's already a lot of existing content. It just may not be in the right quality, the right quantity, or even the right format for you to use on your platforms to tell your stories and to talk about your brands and products. So again, the audit process is critical. And sometimes I always like to say that the best content might be locked in people's heads. There's some people in the organization who I think are legacy owners, people who have history and context on the business or the brand. And unfortunately, they've just never documented what they know. So, the auditing is not necessarily just physical assets or looking at hard drives, but even talking to people who might have a lot of content that is simply locked in memory and not documented. Identify the needs. Again, this is to speak to your target audiences, your customers, maybe run a digital survey, do a focus group to really understand what is the content they want to see, what are the conversations they want to have, what are the things that are important to them. And again, this is based on insight, where rather than making assumptions about what your audience wants, we actually go to market and actually then see what our audience actually needs. Then the third step is analyzing our content. Once you've sort of managed to sort of collate it and repurpose it and package it, what do you do with it? Can you publish it? Does it need to be spruced up? Does it need to be redone so that it works properly? And then, of course, once that's done, we go into our social media content plan. And this is where we basically go into broadcasting or publishing our content on platforms. And again, the whole idea is that these things are always have to be aligned to our digital marketing strategy. We're not making this stuff up. We know ultimately how it feeds back into sort of the bigger picture of what we're trying to achieve. Then being results driven, this is again where we spend time understanding the data and the insights coming from what's happening. And this is basically looking at our overall digital performance. What are we seeing in terms of follows, likes, shares, downloads, sales, all the key metrics that tell us how our content is performing. And again, because content is an ever-evolving process, then we want to always make sure that we keep switching up things. This keeps our content interesting, stops our stakeholders from finding it boring or repetitive. And more importantly, looking at some of the practices, let's say, of our competitors, our contemporaries, they might be doing things that we don't know or are not seeing. And we always want to make sure that we spend time also observing and monitoring what they too are doing. Okay, I see a comment about logging in, logging out. I'll close the box there. Okay, great. We'll continue. Now, at the heart of the content really is this issue of storytelling. And whether it's social media, content on your website, maybe your blog for search engines, or just content for community engagement where you want to get involved in things like user-generated content. The most critical thing here, I think, is that we want to make the content about the people, the community, those who are engaging with our brand. And we want to make sure that content is compelling. So rather than focusing on our brand and our organization per se, we need to make the stories and the content about them, right? And that means everything from tips, advice, sharing human interest stories about them, what you're doing on the ground as an organization. And that's the kind of content that really resonates the most when it comes to platforms, with particular focus on social media. So as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to engaging content, this is two of the largest indigenous banks in Kenya, the KCB Bank and also Co-op Bank. And this was, I think, a Saturday a couple of years ago, and I saw this. And what was happening is that it looked like it was a banter between the social media people at KCB Bank and also Co-op Bank. And they're basically making fun of each other. I won't necessarily be able to translate what they're saying in Kiswahili here, but you can see that, KCB starts off by making fun of Co-op Bank, and then Co-op Bank claps back and makes fun of them. And you can see these are memes. These are not high grade creatives or expensive creatives to do. They probably just grabbed these online and created their content. And my point here is that basically even the most significant, most successful, most formal brands that we have in a market like Kenya have the ability to go out and do this kind of content. And that I would say is that a good example where a brand should not also just be thinking about useful, valuable, engaging content, but also entertaining content. And remember, this is in the context of a Saturday. On a Saturday or Sunday, people don't want to see serious content on your social media. They want stuff that's light, that reminds them that it's the weekend, that they're just engaging and feeling a bit fun. And you can see that this is very much aligned with the tone or the sort of the mindset that people would have on a weekend, where the brands can actually allow themselves to have a bit of fun. This one in particular was for me very clever. This was a Facebook group that I'm a part of. One day this guy shows up and he says that he's a personal home trainer and that is available to train people who are on this group. Now, for me, what I like about this guy's approach is so many small things that have maybe subtle innuendo, a bit sexual perhaps, but he says they're personal home trainer. He could just have said home trainer. He didn't have to be topless. He could have worn a t-shirt. And then you can see the women who are commenting when he put this, including one saying Jesus is Lord. But the point at the end of the day, and by the way, this is usually a very tame, very relaxed group, people selling fridges, TVs, looking for places for school. It's usually a very, very, very humble, very modest Facebook group in the area where I live. And this guy came out of nowhere, and within minutes, this Facebook group was on fire. And that's the whole point. It's provocative, it's different, it's unconventional, and that's why he got the attention of the group. And when you think about, when you're creating your content, you've got to ask yourself those sort of questions. Like, everyone is posting content online. Why will they pay attention to what I have to say? And in that sense, then this gentleman here is a genius, because what he did is he got the attention of the group. He cut through the noise. And he had, for that moment in time, the ability to appeal or possibly provoke people in the group to some kind of action. So again, a very good example of how content can be a catalyst for engagement. This for me is a very powerful example. This was from deep within the COVID period. This was a family that had emigrated, I think, from Eastern Europe to North America, to New York specifically. And they literally set up a restaurant with all their savings, and that happened just before the pandemic. So as you can imagine, with all their savings, they took a bank loan and all these things. They lost all their, their business. They lost everything, and they were living on mattresses on the floor. So you can see, this is a very, difficult time for this family. And you notice that the point I'm trying to emphasize is the storytelling, where the first panel is the story in the post 9 of 12. So by the time we got to this point, you can imagine that the audience or the readers of this had gone through 8 previous posts before getting to number 9. And then we get to number 10, which is where the ask happens. And they're asking, can you help us get off the ground, help them to get their family to a safe and stable space? And if you've been moved by their story, please consider contributing here. So even if it's a fundraising situation, you're a brand or business or startup looking to raise money, the point here is that you need to spend time building that engagement, building that emotional connection with your potential supporter before you ask for support. And as you can see in the last phrase, you can see this is them on the GoFundMe. And at that point in time, they'd raised almost $1.24 million US dollars from a $500,000 target. Now, I can only imagine that money was sufficient to get them back on their feet. But just remember that the storytelling had to happen first before the ask, all right? And this is just an example of long-form content designed specifically to create that emotional connection, human interest, and then at the end of it, there's an ask. And this is a mechanism that works for anyone who's trying to raise money, whether it's a nonprofit or in this case, a family that was financially in need. Another example of great content is this one. And there are 2 examples here that I think are interesting. The first one is, again, Humans of New York. For those of you who've never heard of Humans of New York, it's one of the largest communities on Facebook. It has about 15 million people, I believe. And they just tell human interest stories. And this one, the first one here was a girl who became a pilot in South Africa. She went through a lot of difficulties to achieve this. She had started a fake, or rather a fundraising thing where she was given a watch by a pilot to raise money through a sort of a fundraising effort. Then the radio stations got wind of it, that it was shut down by the regulator. The story spread on social media, and I think the radio station set up a fundraising thing. And immediately they were able to raise money for her to go do a private pilot and her commercial pilot's license. Now, the point is the story was very deep, very emotional, very strong. And you can see at the bottom that the story had over 400,000 engagements, over 11,000 comments, and almost 36,000 shares. Now, in social media, for you to get 36,000 shares organically with no paid media is almost unheard of. And as far as I can tell, possibly till today, this may be the single most successful post on the Humans of New York at this point in time. You will also find that in this instance, this particular post also got her even more viral visibility, meaning that people globally started to reach out to her and engage with her. But basically, by telling this powerful story, making it very human, very relative, then people were able to connect to the story, and they all started reaching out to her and connecting to her. The second one is actually a local brand in Kenya called Chloride Exide. And Chloride Exide is in the business of doing car batteries and also energy solutions. And in this instance, what happened is that this is the leadership team or the exco at Chloride Exide during Breast Cancer Awareness Month a few years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago. And what happened is they all went to work dressed as women to show solidarity or to use humor to bring attention to what is essentially a very sensitive and painful topic for women, which is breast cancer. So they pushed this out and it completely went viral. But what's interesting again is this was a local Kenyan-based piece of content. You can see that there's almost 6,000 something engagements, almost 2,000 comments, and almost 7,000 shares. Again, this was a organic piece of content. The gentleman, the white man there is actually the CEO of the company. The gentleman in the black miniskirt is actually, I think, the COO or the CFO. But what's interesting as an offset is that not only did it create brand awareness and virality, they actually saw sales increase as a result of this content. So that's another thing. It's not always just about being engaged or people talking about your brand and finding this humorous and also interesting, but also at the same time, it actually led to a bottom line impact. So stuff like this actually performs, or rather can improve the performance of your business. This was me, actually. This was something I did, I think, about 2 years ago. And it was interesting because I was stuck in traffic and I took this photo of this billboard, also coincidentally Chloride Exide. I don't work for them. This is just very much a coincidence. And I took this photo, and my joke here was basically saying, I wonder if guys saw this billboard and thought this lady, this beautiful lady on a motorcycle would come to their homes to deliver this battery. This is a battery delivery service that the same company offers. And I was making fun that Nduthi guy is almost like, I think you call them Okada in Nigeria, the guy who rides a motorcycle. Maybe they thought it'd be a pretty woman like this, and then it just turned out to be a random guy. And it was very random. I was just in traffic. I took the photo. I think it took me all of 1 minute to do all this. And it went viral, at least in the level that I'm a small user on Twitter. And you can see that I got 71 retweets, 9 quotes and 152 likes. And again, the point I'm trying to make here sometimes is sometimes the most trivial, almost casual sounding content can be the most profound in terms of engagement and reach. And again, going back to the point I said, entertaining content will always perform well. I never thought it'd do this well. I never had an intention for it to do this well. But as an individual who's not an influencer and somebody who just puts content online, I was pleasantly surprised that my tweet did very well. So what else do we know about content that engages well? We know that images are very important, high quality images, provocative images, images that are going to connect to the audiences are critical. We know video is highly valued when it comes to engagement on social media. We also know emoji as a way of sort of making content less formal, more casual, more social media is also important. Other key considerations when it comes to content, the data tells us that 82%, and this number has not gone down at all. If anything, it's gained a few points, of consumer internet today is dedicated to video. So whether that's Netflix, YouTube, TikTok, and so forth, consumers are basically voting to watch videos rather than read content. And this has a very big implication for brands and marketers online, because if you're not creating content that essentially is video-based, there's a huge opportunity lost, because that is what people are consuming the most. It's also important to think about the content in terms of whether it's fit for platform. You will note here that each platform has different dimensions and different qualities when it comes to what you post. So you'll see that, for instance, profile photos are different across the four platforms, except in the case of LinkedIn and Twitter. But when it comes to the landscape or the cover photo, each and every one of these has its own unique dimension. When it comes to the portrait, different dimensions. When it comes to the square, different dimensions. And the point here is very simple, that it's not a one size fits all. Quite often, for effective digital marketing, you want to make sure that your content is fit for platform. When it comes to social video, and again, in this case, we're looking at short form video, whether it's Instagram Reels, TikTok, or YouTube Shorts. Again, some of these numbers have changed, but you will see that each one of them has different factors, different considerations, such that what you might post on TikTok might not even be able to run on YouTube or Instagram, and vice versa. So again, making sure that your content is fit for platform. We also find that when it comes to especially a lot of our younger demographics today, a lot of them are not likely to read long form content, meaning that in a world that's gone very much TikTok-like, you want to make sure your content is very much concise and somewhat light. So people should be able to scan and consume it quickly and move on to the next thing. So that snackable behavior is something that we're seeing when it comes to content, especially written narrative. Also, they've done the research and they found that content, again, to get the right attention, including, of course, things like headlines, even on long form content, you must be able to get attention within 3 seconds. If you don't do it in 3 seconds, somebody moves on to the next piece of content. So think about, why does somebody pay attention to your content? Can you make the right impact, either through narrative or visual elements that allows them to stay riveted or interested within only 3 seconds? Yeah. So again, very critical that you make your content as snackable as possible. And even in long form content, that first headline, that first moment of consumption, is it compelling enough beyond 3 seconds for them to move to the next step? We also think about what is important when it comes to planning our content. And we need to think about things like the types of content we're producing and how we promote it. We have to think about the frequency with which you post content. People have different views on how often you need to publish content. What's the target audience for each piece of content? Again, this can also have a bearing on the format of the content. Is it video? Is it written? Is it animated? And which demographic perhaps, or which type of persona are you targeting? Who's going to create the content? Again, that assumption that content will simply magically appear doesn't exist. There needs to be a concerted effort to create good content. And who will promote this content? How will it be promoted? So all these steps, again, going back to strategy, are very critical, because again, you want to make sure that you have the ability to actually do it. There are different ways to view content in terms of how you can structure it or package it. You can follow things such as the rule of thirds. Again, this is not in any way written in stone. You want to make sure, for instance, 1/3 of your content could be promoting your organization, converting readers, generating an ROI perhaps from sales by connecting, let's say, to your e-commerce platform. It could be sharing thought leadership, ideas, stories. It could also be about personal interactions, or what we call user-generated content, content that has come from your users that you then repost on your social media platforms. It could also be a content matrix where you decide to allocate different quantities of content for different types of things. So maybe 50% will drive content back to a website or blog. 5% could be curated from other sources. Remember, I mentioned you may not always want to create the content, but you might want to source content from other sources that you think are relevant to your audience. And of course, make sure that you give credit if it is intellectual property. Also, 20% of content could be brand goals, things like events, announcements, CSR. And then 5% could be about things like people and culture. This is, again, more around the human interest type of content, which in my experience has always been the content that gets the most engagement, as I've just shown you. Again, when you have a content calendar, you want it to be a shareable resource. Again, it will give you an idea of what's going to be published, when it's going to be published, typically on a weekly or monthly basis. So for instance, by now, typically any brand should know what they're going to post on Easter. By now, because they've created the assets, they've done the planning, they know it's going to happen. And again, with the content plan, it gives you really a way to sort of plan ahead, to anticipate, and to just not feel that you're disorganized when it comes to your social media and also your digital marketing. So as you plan your calendars, think about days like holidays, especially the ones that are most popular or relevant. Seasonal events, things like back to school are very popular. Launches of important initiatives, and even recurring campaigns, things that happen every year, depending on the nature of the organization. This is a very high level content calendar. You can see, for instance, in this instance, that each day of the week has 2 posts, a morning and afternoon post. You have an image section, you have the actual content. You also have the objective. Again, this is what is this piece of content to serve? Is it to inform? Is it to provide a tip? And then you can even see where this content is going to live or where it's going to publish. So again, this is a very high level view. In this case, this is an organization providing a medical service called a pill shop, and you can see the different types of content, how they break it down and so forth. Another example of a content calendar is this one. In this instance, you can see each day they have 4 posts, and they always start each day with a quote of the day. Then in this case, this is for a brand called Kotex, which does feminine sanitary products. And what they've done here is broken down again according to Instagram or Facebook. Content is published according to different times of the day and different themes around what they're doing as a brand. And again, in this case, they're speaking to women. So you'll see, things like the holiday fantasy. They'll talk about, in this case, the makeover challenge, talking to your man about periods, so the very much content is driven around speaking to women who actually use these products. So that gives you, again, a sense of the sort of diversity you have in content calendars. And then these are some of our clients. This is an insurer here in Nairobi. They're called First Assurance. And again, another format of content calendar can be a PowerPoint presentation. So what you do is you have your visual and then your narrative and all the content indicated there. And the idea here is just to really give a nice way of presenting your content calendar, especially when you're sharing it throughout the organization. Rather than using a spreadsheet, you can have a PowerPoint format like this. And you can see the different contents, you can see the visual, you can see the narrative and so forth. And then the second client in this format, this is CPF, which is a organization in pensions and asset management. And here, this is a mobile app. We're promoting a mobile app called M-Pension that allows people who are not pensioned to sign up and pay using mobile money. So again, in this instance, you can see the date, you can see the image, you can see the hashtags, and you can also see the call to action to the link and also the short code for USSD. And again, same brand, same sort of situation. I think the same day, the bit of colloquial English here with some Kiswahili, but they're basically saying pay 50 shillings a day, secure your future, and then the different call to actions with the different hashtags. So that again is another format of content calendar that you can use. Another way of doing this is also to switch up and give your content diversity. You might have different types of activities the whole day. So on Monday, in this case, you start off with an FAQ, then Motivation Monday, a Twitter poll, positive brand news, and then Tuesday is a retweet, key piece of content, ask a question, then user-generated content. Wednesday, pro tip, GIF, Wednesday wisdom, video. Thursday is always popular for Throwback Thursday, so you could have something around that. A key statistic, go live. So again, the point here is really that content calendars and content strategies as per timeline can be so diverse, and there's so many ways to make sure that your content doesn't become boring or repetitive or routine-like. You can have so many different ways of engaging your stakeholders. And of course, at the back of it, you have your analytics to then help you understand what content is working, what's not working, what are people most liking. And as you keep switching up and trying different content strategies using these content calendars, then you can sort of see what's working for you. Another way to play around with content calendars can also be at the basis of daily thematics. So in this case, we can say Mondays when a brand maybe talks about tips. Tuesdays could be human interest stories, so maybe talking about people. Wednesdays could be very open, meaning that you are open to trying all types of content without any real restrictions. Thursdays can be TBTs, or what we call Throwback Thursdays. Fridays could be maybe a customer story or a employee story. And then Saturdays and Sundays are chilled, right? So you don't want them to be too serious. You don't want it to be too business-like, unless, of course, you're a restaurant that's promoting, special offers on the weekend, for instance, But the weekend should always be lighter and less commercial, as it were. So when it comes to creating content, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, I strongly recommend a tool called Canva. I think I discovered personally Canva maybe 5 years ago. Canva is easily one of the most user-friendly tools that allows normal people to look like graphic designers once you get the hang of it. I remember I conducted a similar training last year, and there's a lady who learned Canva so well that she's now doing business, or rather the side hustle, creating content for people on Canva, everything from business cards to social media content and so forth. So it's not just a hack in terms of content for social media and other types of creative, but people are literally turning this into a business opportunity. So I strongly recommend Canva, and we'll have a look at it in a moment. When it comes to content creation, another tool that I highly recommend is Otter, otter.ai, and Otter basically allows you to create content on the basic of using your voice, and then it transcribes your voice into written narrative. I'm sure you're all familiar with ChatGPT. In the context of digital marketing, this has been highly disruptive. People are now using this to actually create content, not just for content calendars, but for websites, for proposals, for all kinds of things that are relevant to digital marketing. So ChatGPT has become very quickly one of the most prized tools for the average content creator or social media manager in the market, because maybe the work that used to take them 4 hours, they're doing in 30 minutes because of using something like ChatGPT. And then another tool, and that's how ChatGPT looks. Another tool is DALL-E. So DALL-E is an image creation tool, which is based on artificial intelligence, similar to ChatGPT. And in this case, it actually creates visual content. And that's DALL-E. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to switch over to my browser. And I want us to see these content creation tools in action. So just give me a quick second. I'm just going to open the necessary windows, and then we'll get into it. It's a bit slow. Let me just give it a moment. Meanwhile, if anybody has a question or clarification, I'd be happy to take it as we wait for these to load. Okay, this is all very surprisingly slow. I think we might have to come back. Taking very long to do this. Okay, let me just go back, and then we'll come back to this session. Please bear with me. Okay, so so when it comes to content considerations, what are the things that you need to think about? Number one, engagement, right? So you're creating the content to really make sure it's tailored to your target audience for impact. You also want to make sure that it's personalized, and also that means the what, the who, and the how of your content. And then lastly, it's also about optimization. And this is where you need to make sure your content is fit for platform. So you're not just publishing content, you're also thinking about the nuances and the factors that make the content actually perform well. So now we'll delve a little bit into the social media platforms. And what I'll do is I'll swing back to the platforms for content creation once they load. Today, I think the modern context, I think all of these platforms are considered to be extremely important. Probably the most important right now in the context of growth and sort of geopolitical consideration is TikTok, the black one. The one that I think, and I don't know how big it is in West Africa, Snapchat. In this market, it's not been as popular as the others, but there you go. And I think it's interesting to look at WhatsApp in this company because WhatsApp is evolving, especially now with communities and other capabilities that it has. It's starting to look and feel more and more like a social media platform, but these are the platforms that matter the most. When it comes to what social media is, I think we need to think about what actually makes it work. One is the conversations in terms of the engagements that happen on platforms, the actual platforms where we publish our content, and then the content itself that builds the links, engagements, and so forth. When it comes to thinking about how this has grown and blown up so far, we know that it has become a platform, especially again post-pandemic, for entertainment, information, conversations, and even e-commerce. And we see that platforms like TikTok have become incredibly popular, and there are other things to watch like Clubhouse and also Twitter Spaces. When it comes to the key benefits, we know that social, number one, is scalable. That's why we have individuals or influencers who are able to reach millions of people. It's highly accessible. We also know that it's highly usable, instantaneous in terms of our publishing, and also the permanence, meaning we can obviously modify content after publishing. In the traditional media characteristics, it was all about command and control, organization control, very monologue, very repetitive, very focused internally, more about educating, and the advertiser is the key driver to the content. In social, we see the audience is in control. It's a dialogue. We adapt the message to our stakeholders. We focus on the audience, remember, adding value to them and not the other way around. We influence and involve. And also it's about user-generated content, or what we call co-creation. Typically, when you think about social media, the things that we need to think about when it comes to how we do our engagement is really two phases of acquisition and retention. As mentioned previously, we need to listen to gain insights for content creation. We then create content to grow social media communities. And then when we go to retention, it's about engaging, maintaining, and growing relevance. And hopefully, if we do a good enough job, our communities actually become advocates for who we are and what it is that we do. So by far, one of the most important platforms these days is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the professional social media, in my opinion. I also like to call it Facebook with a suit and tie. And again, it's also one of the best platforms for content these days because its organic reach is excellent. Even though you may not have followers or connections, you find that you get content reaching many, many people through LinkedIn. The most critical thing about LinkedIn is obviously thought leadership. That is where you can shine on LinkedIn. You always want to make sure that the content is very professional. It's focused on showing what you know and what you are authoritative about as a person or as a brand. And that is what works best on LinkedIn. Then you have, of course, Facebook with its 3 billion users every month. That's a third of the world's population, the largest social media in the world. And over 94% of its users are using it via the mobile app. Social media, again, when it comes to Facebook, you want to have a specific strategy for that, but probably most important is to try and go live on Facebook because Facebook organic reach is very low, less than 3% last time I checked. And you want to make sure you go live because going live is one of the few means and ways that you can reach your community without having to buy ads at scale. So always think about going live because that's one of the ways that you can engage your stakeholders. The other thing I want to mention about Facebook that's critical for those who may not be familiar, Meta Business Suite is incredibly important as a brand or a business. Why? Because it allows you to manage all your social media platforms with Facebook, or rather Meta, and that means specifically Facebook, Instagram, and also WhatsApp. So basically you can publish across platforms, you can have a common inbox, you can create ads, you can track insights, you can see all activities at a glance, and all the helpful tools are there. Before this was there, everything was fragmented and messy. You couldn't even schedule Instagram posts until this was launched. And I think Facebook has done, or rather Meta has done an incredibly good job to give users for free a tool to manage all their social media engagements and WhatsApp from one common dashboard. Then, of course, you have Twitter, which has the 280 characters, very popular for customer service and real-time conversations. Twitter is very much about real-time content, so breaking stories, news, things happening throughout the day. And some people even say that Twitter is the only remaining social media in the world. What are some of the things that you need to think about on Twitter? Limit hashtags to 1 to 3 per tweet. Be very conversational. Keep your copy short and sweet. Make sure you use videos and graphics where possible, because that's what also drives the algorithm. Use emojis to add emotion and informalness. Avoid images with heavy text because the algorithm will penalize you for that. Keep videos to 15 seconds or less. And of course, like I mentioned before, test. Use the data and analytics to see what's working and not working. Then you have Instagram, which, as we know, is a platform that has evolved immensely since it first launched. Photo and video sharing. So we have things like IGTV, Reels, and so forth. It is one of the fastest growing platforms behind TikTok, and of course, well established, in particular with the youth globally. And Instagram, again, we highly encourage you to post visually appealing content. Of course, with the adaptations of things like stories and reels, it's become a platform again for sort of lighter content as well. And also, we highly recommend you go live on Instagram as well. One of the things that's critical for brands and organizations when using Instagram is to make sure that they switch their account to professional. With professional, you get access to things like analytics. You can link to Instagram stories. You're taken more seriously, and you can also tag products for shopping. So if you're still on the personal profile, make sure you switch over to the professional profile, and it gives you then all these key benefits that you might not have in the personal one. This again is some of the features. If you open the dashboards under the professional edition, you can see that you get your graphs, you get all these different features and functionalities that are not available on the personal edition of Instagram. And then very important, Reels. Reels is the format that is competing with TikTok aggressively. And one of the things you know is that whenever two platforms are competing aggressively, they will always prioritize what is being most competitive. So you'll find that Reels is incredibly visible on the platform relative to, say, posts and stories, because they are competing with TikTok. So always try and prioritize Reels on Instagram because they are competing with TikTok. Instagram Live and Live Rooms, again, for real-time conversations and engagements. Again, very powerful tool for community engagement. And this is something that you definitely want to do on Instagram. TikTok, as we know, is the world's fastest growing social media. I think right now at 2 billion users. So imagine in a handful of years, they're just behind Facebook. And what you'll find, of course, just like the video, you can see that it's very informal, very light, short video. And also, again, incredible reach organically. You don't even have to have followers and people will see your content. It's very easy to go viral on TikTok. So creative content is rewarded with reach and engagement. So very much the place to be in terms of getting the most out of social media today. And again, as we look at TikTok, we can see that it's something that I think globally everyone knows to be one of the most exciting platforms. YouTube, as we know, is not only the second largest search engine after Google, of course owned by Google, but also the world's leading video platform as we speak. Again, YouTube is in a situation today where they're also competing with the likes of TikTok. And for this very reason, YouTube Shorts is the kind of content you want to be publishing, because this is where, again, they're trying to win that segment of market that is on TikTok, mostly younger people. And you want to make sure that you're also taking advantage of YouTube Shorts. We also have the rise of social audio, and social audio, again, is a phenomenon that took off during the pandemic. Clubhouse was the first one out of the blocks and continues to be an interesting platform, although at least in this part of the world, it has lost, I suppose, mileage to Twitter Spaces. Twitter Spaces continue to be a great place for audio conversations, similar to a webinar without the video component. And of course, with Twitter backing it, then it is a platform where you have many brands have installed users already on Twitter, so it's easy for them to run spaces to an established audience. Whereas, chat, the Clubhouse is only specifically for the social audio alone. Then podcast is something that has also again exploded. Today, modern brands are investing a great deal of money into podcasting because this has become almost like the new website. People are listening to podcasts in what we call the in-between times. You're in the commute, you're in the gym, you're doing something else like washing the dishes, you can still listen to a podcast. You're driving to work, you can listen to a podcast. So in many ways, it's become the new radio, and it's really, really becoming it all. This is Anchor. Anchor is a product that's owned by Spotify. I think they recently changed the name to Spotify Podcasting. And this is the easiest way to create a podcast. Literally in a matter of minutes, you can be up and running. And it works also as a mobile app on your phone. Then you also have Spotify for podcasters. So this platform has now been merged with Anchor. So this is one platform now for publishing podcasts. And even on Meta, this wasn't, I think it's not available in Africa yet, but they too also are trying to get into the podcasting space. But that is yet another area that is worth paying attention to. Then you have your social media analytics, which is really understanding the performance of your social media platforms. I remember going back to the digital marketing strategy, you want to make sure you spend time building analytics and understanding analytics to measure, quantify, and understand how your digital platforms are performing. And more specifically, you can look at them from a single network or single platform. You can look at them in an aggregated manner. So if you're a social media management tool, you can bring all reporting into one dashboard. But ultimately, this is where you're able to measure or control and to understand the metrics around your digital marketing activities. Before we go to advertising, I'm just going to try and see if my links opened up so we can see the content creation tools. Yes, fantastic. So I'm now gonna open the browser. And we'll just have a practical look at how some of these tools work. So the first one you have here is Otter, otter.ai. Remember I was saying that these are, again, artificial intelligence tools. I love this one in particular because it allows me to literally record everything I'm saying. So you'll notice in a moment that I've just clicked the button and you will see that it'll start to transcribe exactly what I'm saying. What I find very impressive is the level of accuracy as I speak. And as you see in a moment, it'll be able to show you exactly what I'm saying. Now, what you'll notice that, for instance, if I see something like, not sure, it'll actually delete those parts that were unclear, and it'll only put the sort of the content that is actually easy to understand. And you can see the relative sense of accuracy is quite high. So you can imagine if you're sitting in a car, you have the mobile app on your phone, or you're sitting in the office and you're thinking, I want to write a blog post, or I want to create some content. At a moment of inspiration, you can do it, you record it, and then once you're done with it, you literally cut and paste that content and you have a blog post, you might have a social media post, or at least the beginnings of one, and then you can edit it and clean it up as it were. And for me, you can imagine in 5 minutes, you'll have a whole bunch of paragraphs on something that you find interesting. So bottom line is, once you stop the recording, you then can literally just come and cut and paste and take that content. You also retain the recording, so it's able to connect the recording of the audio to the text. And this system also works on things like Zoom calls, working in the background automatically. The next one is ChatGPT, and I'm actually on the paid version, so I'm going to use the latest version of this. And because we're on a Simon Page training, I'm going to call this Sam Create. I'm going to say create a social media calendar for 2 weeks for Simon Page College of Marketing, Nigeria, focused on digital marketing training courses offered through the college. So I put in my prompt, that's what we call them in ChatGPT. So now it's going to the cloud, and in a moment or so, you should see the content typing out, I hope. And there we go. So as you can imagine, for social media managers or people who might not even be able to afford a social media manager, if they're just saying, look, I need a way to create content and I don't have the time or the resources. And you can see it's literally just on the basis of those few words, actually creating content, hashtags, the works. I mean, just incredible. And for me, this is a game changer, because what it means is that the tools I'm sharing with you suggest that you don't have to this doesn't have to be difficult, right? It can be simpler, easier, faster, better using artificial intelligence. And this is a practical demonstration of why this is so revolutionary, because it's even going as per platform, as you can see. And yeah, I mean, of course, you can use the free version. It will pretty much give you the same results. But again, using artificial intelligence, you have a way of creating, written narrative, or what we call generative AI. That's the technology that we're seeing at work over here. So again, this has been revolutionary for many people who create content. And then, of course, on this other side, we have Canva. I think I'm a bit short on time, so I want to try and speed this up and cover some of the other topics. And Canva basically is a content creation tool. They too have introduced elements of artificial intelligence. But more importantly, you can see from the menu, you can create Instagram stories, Facebook posts, even TikToks. And all you need to do is once you click on the template, you then start creating the content. For those of you who've never used Canva, I assure you this is revolutionary as well. And with a bit of time spent in it, within a matter of hours, you can be creating social media content. And again, because it's template driven, you can start off with either a clean slate, or you can find an existing creative and then you adapt it to your brand. And there's everything in here. I mean, literally, every kind of creative content you could imagine can be done from here. And then this is the free version, so I'm not even using the paid version. So this is literally available on free. And then, of course, the dimensions and the durations and the likes for the creative content will also be automatically done for you. So this is a game changer, again, just like the other two tools I've shown you. And then the last one was, and I completely forgot this, this was DALL-E. Let's see if it comes up quickly. So DALL-E is also an artificial intelligence-based content creation tool. I'll just get to it. And it's also owned or run by the company that owns ChatGPT. And this is kind of incredible what it's actually able to do. So I'm going to ask it to create a visual piece of content based on a prompt. So I'll just give it a moment to load. Now let me close these other windows. As fast as possible. Okay, looks like we're ready to go. So I'm going to say create a picture of a lady, of a Nigerian lady holding a baby, drinking Coca-Cola. And I'll click that. And in a moment, you'll see, oh, okay, it's overloaded. Let's try again. So, okay, the server is busy, but let's see if it works. I hope it works. So this is an indication that the whole world is trying to use most of these tools. I'm sorry, I'll try one more time. Normally it works really quick, really well. Oh yeah, we're lucky. It's actually worked. So there you go. So again, I don't know whether the lady is definitively Nigerian. And what is also cool is that these images are, how do you say? They're license free, meaning that you can literally download them and use them for your social media or your website or whatever it is, because they're treated almost as original works of art. So, and you can even see the variety of content there. So basically, people are using this to also create visuals using artificial intelligence. So just shows you that we live in incredible times. The tools that are out there that allow you to create, visual and written content without having to literally do so manually. And of course, as you save time, you save money, you save effort, it allows you to do more things. I'm literally going to have to zip through the remaining 20 minutes, just in case you guys also have some questions. Don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to try and be as quick as possible. So digital advertising, again, the key thing here is that it's all about data-driven approach. So we can target on behavior, location, audience, browser, and devices. Typically, if you're thinking about how to do that, you can imagine targeting users by the time of day. Like I mentioned in the case of the diaper company, you can target by country, you can target by suburb, you can target by mobile network, the content, the interest, the device, the operating system, and there are even more and more criteria that you can use. So Google Ads, of course, is one of the biggest platforms out there, allowing us to do both search ads and display ads. What's interesting, again, is, of course, with Google Ads, it also gives us access to YouTube ads, which, of course, makes YouTube the second largest search engine as well. And typically, when you're setting up Google Ads, you have your ad groups, which is where your content is broken down for optimization. You have your text ads, you have your keywords, and you have your landing pages. So basically, through these 4 steps, you're able to then maximize your Google Ads opportunity. Then you have your Facebook ads. Again, Facebook ads, or rather Meta ads as they're known today, allows you to run ads on both Facebook and also on Instagram from one common dashboard. What is critical to note, somebody's microphone is on, is that you can target on the basis of awareness, consideration, or conversion. As you do so, you have different types of ad placements you can run. You can do the carousel, the single image, which is probably the easiest one, single video, slideshow, canvas, and collection. The single image is by far the easiest one, where you just put an image, some narrative, and a call to action to your ad. The placements on Facebook run across different mobile and desktop placements, and your ads can be seen accordingly. Again, you can also run messenger ads. So within Facebook Messenger ads can be seen. You can also run something called lead ads, which is one of my favorite ones, where somebody, if you need somebody to provide their first name, last name, and email address, you would come here and create a Facebook lead ad, which then would give you access to your content. Again, somebody's asking if they'll get a recording of this session. I'll leave that to the Simon Page team. They will guide you on whether you'll get a copy of this. So the good thing about this is that on Facebook, it pre-populates the contact details from somebody's account details. And this then is sent to the system. You can download the spreadsheet and use that to now communicate to those potential customers. One of the cool things about Facebook, you can run something called custom audiences. So let's say you've built a database of phone numbers or email addresses of customers or people you want to reach. You can target those people specifically by uploading a spreadsheet with those contacts, and you reach only those people in the custom audience. But also, which is very cool, is something called lookalike audiences, where you can target people on the basis of them having similar characteristics to the target audiences you're trying to reach. And this is very powerful because it means then rather than trying to just show ads on the basis of interest, you can actually show ads on the basis of people who are similar to existing customers. And again, that's beautiful because then it increases the likelihood of success. And of course, Instagram ads have the same criteria as Facebook ads because they run off the same dashboard. Then you have Twitter ads as well, of which you can run what we call the promoted text. That's the simplest form of ad you can run there. You also have the promoted image, and that's where you put an image. You always want to make sure there's an image because that usually increases conversions and engagement. And again, when you try different types of ads, you can test different ad units, video, interstitials, native. You can also simplify conversions in terms of your call to actions. You can capture leads and audiences for remarketing or re-engagement, and you can also make your campaigns shareable. So making sure, again, you want to sort of meet all these criteria. Another thing that's very powerful is what we call remarketing or retargeting. Again, when you're driving digital ads, only 2% of traffic will convert in the first instance. So you want to make sure that you can still reach potential buyers who may not be ready to buy today, but maybe in 2 weeks they will. So that's retargeting. And that's an example where, for instance, you went to Jumia, you saw a fridge, and then the fridge followed you for the next 2 weeks everywhere you went online. So that technology is called retargeting, and it's highly valued in trying to drive conversions over time. We also think that influencer marketing is incredibly critical in Africa for social media and also for digital campaigns. Why? Because of reach, original content, and consumer trust. To do this effectively, we find that there's some research that confirms that influencers are believed to be worth 5 times ROI compared to other marketing channels. And more specifically, and again, giving credit to my Arsenal team, this is a moment when Danny Welbeck scored a magnificent goal and he went to the corner post and he sprinkled the salt. And this is a classic example of a person copying an influencer in the real world. And that's what influencers do. We follow them, we imitate them because we value them for their content, for their influence. And this is a classic example of where this sort of thing happens. And why is this critical? Because I think at the end of the day, what's happening is that the organization is no longer what it tells the community it is, it's what the community tell each other it is. And influencers basically act as amplifiers of that particular approach, meaning that on one hand, you talk about your organization, there's zero influence at the bottom. Influencers talk about your organization, and then eventually others talk about your organization or brand. So the goal is to move from zero influence through the catalyst effect of the influencer to the general consumer, then starting to talk about your brand. The situation is that usually influencers have specific needs and brands have needs. So brands want to combat competition, they want disruptive creative, authentic messaging, credibility. And influencers want innovation, they want to be discovered, they want the latest and greatest, they want research, they want content. And when you have that nice overlay, then basically there's a partnership formed between the influencer and the brand. When it comes to choosing influencers, choose the right ones, the ones that you think are the right fit. It's not always about the ones with millions of followers. You have nano influencers, you have micro influencers, you have mega influencers, but more importantly, find the ones that are the right fit. Number two, building awareness about your organization or your brand is also critical. Also engaging them over time, because influencers are not like Google or Facebook where you just buy an ad, they're people. So you actually have to build a relationship to have the best engagements. And of course, if you win influencers, you then have them become advocates. And I remember in Kenya, we had a situation, I don't know if you've seen this in Nigeria before, where I think it was Samsung or Oppo was running a campaign for phones. And when they were posting on Twitter, they found out later that these guys were all posting from iPhones because it said posted from iPhone, even though the ad said, or the post said, here I'm using my Oppo phone. So again, in the perfect world, you want an influencer who's actually an advocate and not somebody who's just doing it for the money. So again, you want to choose the right influencers who resonate. Again, we come back to storytelling as a critical component. You want to give them creative license. People can always sense when content has been scripted. So make sure there's creative license, and then also partner with influencers who engage with your target audience regularly. There are many different types of ways of running influencer campaigns today. One of them is to use an influencer platform. This is Webfluential. It's one of the platforms we've used in the past. Allows you to create a campaign to source and identify influencers. In this case, at that point in time in Kenya, we could see 259 influencers. We could see their rankings. We could see their performance, their reach. And you notice that, for instance, an influencer might have more followers. Like in this case, there's one with 330,000, but they only have 2 stars versus this guy who has 5 stars. So it's not just about the number of followers. It's also about how effective they are in running campaigns. And a good influencer marketing platform will allow you to discern, which influencer is the right fit for your brand. So there are many influencer marketing management platforms. You have platforms like Clear, which is owned by Meltwater. Meltwater is a social listening software. This is one of the platforms you can use. There's also Aspire is another one that you can also consider. And also Upfluence. Now, there are many, many influencer platforms. Some have good reach in Africa, some don't. So I'm not advocating for any of these. I'm just saying that these are some of the options that are available to you. And then this is a sample campaign plan for influencers. You might say, I'm going to do it for 15 weeks. I'll take 6 to 8. Define the hashtags. Make sure that each influencer has a unique tracking code. Define the tasks that they're going to undertake as part of the campaign. And break it down into the tasks. So first of all, identification and onboarding. You kick off your campaign. You look at the weekly strategies, execution, reporting, optimization, and monitoring. And then, of course, you have the end of campaign report and closure. And then, of course, expected results. In this case, they're hoping to reach about 3 million followers, or rather people, and then look at sales and awareness being sort of the key metrics that are being targeted. Campaign management, again, on a regular basis, you want to make sure that you're managing your campaigns. So testing ads, new ads, landing pages, and so forth. And then, of course, generating reports that are going to tell you how your campaign is performing. And typically, you will find that the best way to do this is you definitely want to have some level of weekly reports. Weekly reports don't have to be super detailed, more like a pulse on what's happening. And then the monthly report tends to be much more detailed. And of course, as you measure your performance from digital advertising, you're looking at things like reach, engagement, and effectiveness. There are things like shares, comments, followers, but most importantly, if you're in the business of trying to make more money online, you definitely want to look at how to measure sales or conversions. I'm going to quickly jump into websites. Now, the assumption is that most of you have websites already, so we're just talking about how you can maximize optimization. And from this point of view, you want to make sure your website is actually designed in a way that's going to drive your business goals. So to do this effectively, we want to make sure, first of all, that we audit our website to see, is it running on the right technology? Has search engine optimization been done properly? You also want to see whether your analytics are telling you things about your traffic patterns and conversion rates. Again, if you have something like Google Analytics installed, you can do that and sort of get a pulse on what's happening. You also want to look at your user experience. Is it easy for a user to sort of navigate and click and find what they need to find or do what they need to do and achieve the task that they set out to do on your website? And of course, it's not just about the usability, but it's also about the user interface, how the website is presented. And then you have your content audit, where you look at your content to see how your content is structured for quality, consistency, structure, tonality, and architecture. In the perfect world, again, we want to look at the 4 key criteria that make a good website. 1 is that it needs to be social integrated. 2, it's designed to acquire customers. 3, the content is of high quality. And lastly, persona segmented, making sure that it's speaking to our different stakeholders. When it comes to building the best user experience for our website, we want to make sure that number 1, it's responsive, meaning that it runs across all different screen sizes from your smart TV all the way down to your smartphone. You also have things like the content. Is it dynamic and relevant for our stakeholders? And also for search engine optimization. And then the visual design, is the website beautiful? Is it well presented? And then is it also easy to use, which is all part of user experience or UX. This is a classic example of responsive design. So again, according to any one of these screens, it's the same website, but it's adapting itself according to the screen. When it comes to the user experience, we always want to make sure that our user experience is built on the foundation of our business objectives, which again comes back to our digital marketing strategy. And you'll notice that we go through all the layers to eventually visual design. So the visual design is very much the last step, meaning that, just like you're building a house, you need to have a solid blueprint to end up with a good house. So if you have a good user experience design, then it's basically having a good blueprint for your website. And again, we look at something called the site plan, which is a sort of a high-level architecture to a typical website, where we cascade all the way down to a specific page. And then you have something called the wireframe. So wireframes essentially just like a blueprint, map out each and every page on a website, showing us content areas, visual areas, navigational elements, and so forth. If you ever want to test your website to see if it's mobile friendly or responsive, you can go to the Google mobile friendly test. Just Google it and then put in your website address. And again, according to Google, which owns Chrome, which is the most popular web browser, they'll be able to tell you whether or not your website is mobile friendly. You also want to make sure your website is conversion rate optimized, meaning that the number of people who visit your website and achieving a specific conversion, there's a good percentage of that. This is a classic example of CRO, or conversion rate optimization, where you can see a clear value proposition, a call to action, and a lead capture form. So the idea here is that the user doesn't really have to think. They're being directed to a specific action, a specific outcome in the shortest, simplest way possible through this landing page. So for me, this is just a classic example of what CRO means, or conversion rate optimization. Again, if you want to check if your website is well optimized, you can also use something called Google Optimize, which allows you to also optimize your conversion rates and the likes through how you set up your pages. Then you have search engine optimization, which is making sure your site can be found for organic search results, which means you're not paying for ads. Again, for me, SEO is one of the gifts that keeps on giving. If you do this well enough, it can serve you for many, many years. So typically, you want to sort of think about how to drive your SEO, whether through organic, referral links, social media, paid ads, and also direct, when these people don't even bother to necessarily go to a search engine. You just type in your brand and hopefully intuit the correct domain name at the same time. So key drivers for SEO today, the biggest one is content. Content is the thing that is going to be most impactful on your SEO. And that's because the likes of Google are prioritizing their algorithms to read the content and determine if it meets the needs of the query that somebody punched into their search engine. So if your content is great, that is probably the most important thing. The second thing that is actually super important is inbound links, which is other websites linking back to you. That's the original thesis under which Google was built, which is something called the Google backlinks. Just forgetting what it's called. But more importantly, also social media links are another factor where when social media links are pointing to your website and people are sharing and commenting on your links, that also becomes an indicator for search engine ranking. SEO, again, is a function of both on-page and off-page SEO. So things happening on your website, things happening off your web page. And as you can see, there's a lot of activities happening in there. But more importantly, you combine the two, and through time and effort, you can actually then achieve great performance. I'm going to just skip the methodology a bit because of time, and we'll go into some of the other key considerations. So SEO is critical because 30% of clicks go to the first item or website that comes up, 70% to the first 5 positions, and then 90% to the first 10 positions, which is basically page 1. So in essence, if you're not on page 1 for the relevant keywords and key phrases, you're potentially never going to be seen because people rarely go beyond page 1. So you want to make sure SEO becomes the cornerstone of your digital marketing strategy. Then Google Maps, which is also critical, helps us show our locations, but this also improves also our SEO. So making sure that we're on Google Business Profiles is also critical. And then live chat has been found to be incredibly valuable. It can actually improve conversions by 30% because when somebody comes to your website, they might have a question or query, and if somebody can answer them there and then you can actually improve conversion. So live chat is not just something interesting to have, but it's actually good for conversions if you can install it. So live chat is platforms like Talk2, which give you this for free. You can also use the paid version, but you can literally install this in 5 minutes and you can be up and running with live chat. And then you also want to make sure you have an SSL certificate. This is something that became best practice about 4 years ago. Surprisingly, many websites in Africa still don't have SSLs, or what we call secure socket layer certificates. And why this is critical is because in July of 2018, Google Chrome, which is the most popular browser, started putting a sign saying not secure if your website lacked an SSL. And of course, when a user sees that, they would lose confidence, especially if your website maybe has e-commerce. And you want to make sure that this is something that's there. If you really must have SSL and you can't afford a certificate, you can get a Let's Encrypt free SSL certificate. It costs exactly $0. And you can install this on your website in a matter of minutes as well. You also want to make sure you have analytics, Google Analytics installed, just to know what's happening on the website and its performance. Website hosting is also critical. It needs to be secure, needs to be scalable, available, and extensible. So you want to have a platform that is not just good for you today, but also could grow with you depending on your requirement. And then you have something called a content delivery network. This again just makes sure your website is deliverable globally, instantly, irrespective of where somebody is located. The biggest platform of choice is Cloudflare, and they do have a free option that you can install to improve the delivery of your website. And then again, another key factor is Page Insights. This is again another free tool from Google. You can use this just to check your website performance on browsers and devices. And the critical thing is that Google will de-rank you if your site is slow. So you want to also make sure you run this check. Also, other website optimization tasks, you will want to make sure you check up your content and update it. You do performance management, hosting management, security, and also quality assurance. Other things that can go wrong, there's no agreement on website goals. You just build a website for the sake of it. There's no measurement of current performance. Again, you don't want to do things blindly. You always use data to inform decisions. Content has to come from somewhere, so making sure that the content is purposeful and intentional. Make sure that you're building the website according to the different audiences and personas. SEO should not be done at the end, but actually at the beginning. And make sure things like mobile responsiveness are factored into the process at the very beginning. And lastly, Web3. So Web3 is really this whole new thing that has blown up in the last few years, where we're looking at decentralization, blockchain, and also token economics. So blockchain is the idea of what they call the digital ledger, a sort of a secure way of determining different types of transactions and activities. You have crypto, which is the digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then you have NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. And then you have metaverses, digital worlds where we can live and work. So all these things collectively today in the modern description define the metaverse. Or Web3. So you have your blockchain, which records information. Essentially, it's a ledger of transactions. And this is how the Bitcoins and Ethereums work today. Basically, a user requests for a transaction. The block represents the transaction that's created. It's broadcast to all the nodes of the network. It gets verified and executed. The block is added to the chain, and then all nodes validate that the block and the transaction has happened. Then you have your cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum, which are very popular. You have crypto exchanges. This is where you can sort of buy and sell crypto. You can, cash out, cash in cryptocurrencies for real cash, or what you call fiat, of which the biggest ones are people like Paxful, which lets you transact peer-to-peer on currencies. And of course, you have Binance, which is the world's largest crypto exchange. You also have what you call non-custodial wallets. MetaMask is one of the most popular ones. So think of this as a wallet for your cryptocurrencies. And so you can keep your crypto safe. And MetaMask is one of the biggest ones in the world, where you can sort of keep your all your different assets within a common wallet. And then you have your non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which became a big thing 2-3 years ago, especially when this particular piece of art by Beeple was sold for $69 million. And also what we're seeing now is that crypto has evolved, rather NFTs have evolved to become a way of providing evidence that something is authentic. So remember, using Bitcoin technologies, you have a way of verification. So people and brands are now starting to use crypto and also NFTs as a mode of validating the authenticity of products. So these are some of the use cases where you might see people connect an NFT to, let's say, a piece of land or a luxury item, like here, this Prada bag having its own NFT. There's also what we call CryptoPunks, which is some of the art and collectibles that were really trending the last couple of years. And they're built on the Ethereum blockchain. You can see the value of some of these pieces of art, $7 million. And all these things are basically traded using Ethereum as the cryptocurrency. More interesting applications for branding and marketing is brands like Nike and Adidas are now getting into the NFT game. And what they're basically doing is they are connecting real world products to NFTs. So you buy a pair of shoes and in the process, you also get an NFT. In this case, you also see that Nike went and bought a virtual shoe company that makes NFTs and sneakers for the metaverse. I know maybe that sounds a bit ridiculous, but if you have a child who's about 9 or 10 years old, you'll see in a moment why this all makes sense. We see brands that are also dabbling in NFTs and Web3 marketing. So Starbucks are creating collectible coffee themed NFTs. So people can gain access to shops and memberships through these. McDonald's are operating virtual restaurants online, including real world home delivery. So you start the engagement in the virtual space and it actually delivered to your home. Then Adidas is linking NFTs to actual products. So again, it becomes a way of determining authenticity, but also giving you value added brand experiences because you own that NFT. This is OpenSea, which is one of the world's most popular places for selling and buying NFTs. I have a personal account myself here. Anyone can open that. And these are some photos I took maybe 2 years ago. And this is a collection of images that I'm actually selling on OpenSea. So what I'm trying to show you here is that at a very practical level, somebody can create NFTs using a photo or graphic you design, and then you can sell it online. And then you have Discord, which is the equivalent of, say, Facebook. It's basically the platform that is used for community engagement within Web3. It's the most popular one. And many brands will build a Discord channel as part of their Web3 initiatives. That is where they essentially have conversations with their stakeholders and communities around the brand. So you go to Discord, you can become a part of it and sort of join other Discords, or you can create your own. And it can be for a very small group of friends and family. It can be for a brand. It can be for different use cases. But the whole point is that it is decentralized and it's not part of the collective of the Twitters and the Facebooks and so forth. So again, this is an alternative that's decentralized, leveraging blockchain and these technologies within Web3. And then you have the likes of Roblox. Here's Roblox using Discord. And more specifically, this is the community channel for Roblox. So it's not on Facebook, it's not on Twitter, it's living on Discord. And then you have the metaverse, which is the 3D virtual spaces. This is where people are starting to create value in virtual experiences. This is why Facebook became Meta. They started seeing this opportunity and built a whole platform. Meta has built something called Meta Horizon Worlds, which you're able to access on your computer or using their virtual reality headsets. These are the headsets, the Quest Oculus that Facebook produces through their business called Oculus. And basically, this is how you then access some of these virtual experiences. Again, this is very, very early days. Many people are really saying that this is not going to happen as fast as Mark Zuckerberg thought. But the beginnings of it are happening, and people are starting to sort of get into this. More importantly, for me, and what I think most will say today is that the real experience of the metaverse is platforms like Fortnite. Young teenagers are the ones, and young adults are the ones you'll find using this. This for me is the real metaverse. This is the stuff that's happening today. Millions and millions of users, people going into these environments, doing virtual gaming, virtual things, buying virtual goods. This is the real manifestation of the metaverse. And of course, if you have a child like I do, Minecraft is yet another sort of metaverse that people are playing around with. Children in particular go in there. And I remember a few years ago, my son wanted a gift for his birthday. It wasn't a product. He wanted money to buy stuff in Minecraft. So you can imagine for children, this is not a virtual world. This is a real world because this is where they interact with their friends. Then Roblox, again, very popular with young children, virtual experiences, another form of metaverse. And you have something called Robux, where you can buy gift cards, and your children or whoever uses it can then buy virtual goods within Roblox and different denominations for those products. And yeah, so basically the three things you need to take away from this session as far as Web3 is concerned is number one, businesses and brands will become highly user-centric through decentralization. Number two, privacy. Consumers are really keen on this because unlike Facebook and the Googles who've misused customer data over the years, these platforms are not in any way linked to them and they're standalone and blockchain-based. And then brands are adapting to this. This is, again, very early days, but they're starting to experiment. Like I showed you the examples of the different brands like Adidas, Nike, and Starbucks trying new things. And yeah, we'll see where that goes. So to wrap it all up, remember I said at the beginning, it's all about willing to unlearn, learn, and relearn. I would like to leave you with one final quote, which is that the strongest of the species are not the one that is most intelligent, but the one that's most adaptable to change. That was Charles Darwin. So my point at the end of this training is that I hope it's been useful. But if there's anything you need to take away is that I hope some of these have provoked your mind, your thoughts, your preconceived notions of what digital marketing is, and that you're ready to adopt and try out some of the next practices of what can work for you, your brands, and your marketing career. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our session. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Christiana, are you moderating?
Yes, thank you so much, Moses. Please, if we have any question, can we please type in the chat box or unmute and ask?
I think the question I keep seeing is whether they're going to get a copy of this.
Right? Yes, yes. We're going to take that. Do we have any other questions?
I'm also going to.
Okay.
I'm just going to provide my details if people want to reach me on WhatsApp or email. So I'm just going to put it in the chat here. So please, if you want to WhatsApp me or email me, I'm going to just give you my contacts here.
Sorry, it's working hours and sorry to interrupt. The working hours, then a lot of distractions, but it's really good to, by the way, very, very great, insightful presentation. But it would be great if we could try to just make a review, just to miss out, to get back on all the points missed out because of the distraction at work.
Yeah, I think the recording has been done, so I don't know that it's been stopped recording, but I'm sure that the Simon Page team will arrange to share this with you. And also the slides. I have no problem with you getting the slides.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining. We'll share the slides and recording with you. Thank you. We'll share it with you.
Yeah, and again, if you want to WhatsApp me or email me, I've just shared my contacts in the chat. My details are there. All
right. I see there are no questions. Thank you so much, Moses. It's been very insightful and useful, and I'm sure that others can say the same. So thank you, everyone. We have come to the end of the masterclass. Thank you so much for taking our time to attend, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Right, everyone, have a great afternoon. And it's been a pleasure, and I hope I'll come to Lagos soon. I've missed being in Lagos in a long time. I know it's not necessarily all of you are in Lagos, but I'm always a great fan of visiting Nigeria. And yes, I'm looking forward to some wonderful jollof rice, you know, and the various dishes that are there. So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, I hope to see you in Abuja also.
Abuja, never been. Happy to come over. I can come do training for you.
Okay then. Okay.
I'm also a Simon Page trainer, so I work closely with Simon Page and the team, not just in Nairobi, but across the other countries as well. So who knows? Maybe we'll meet in a training as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your time, Globe.
Okay, great, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Yeah, bye.